It's been just over 1 month since the release of AEW Fight Forever. There are some notable omissions in the roster for this game, including FTR, who were relegated to being DLC, Hook, the current women's champion, Toni Storm, and even some more minor wrestlers such as Sonny Kiss. I don't know when the cutoff date for this game was, or whenever during development it was considered finished, but there's a decent amount of notable names that are missing. Of course, I'd imagine some of them would be added through DLC, as this game already does have a season pass, but this game was outdated from day one. Gameplay-wise, one issue I've noticed is the referee will run up to you and physically count, which is realistic. Any match that features a referee, whether it be Knox or Edwards, they'll have to physically run up and count the pin. However, if you attempt to pin on a match that doesn't feature a referee, such as the barbed wire match, then the count will immediately start. There will be no delay whatsoever, which makes me believe that it's most likely harder to kick out in those matches than matches that do feature a referee. From the gameplay perspective, I understand that Ukes wanted to go much more of an arcadey route. They wanted to focus more on having a game play like No Mercy or the Nintendo 64 wrestling games of old, which is a bit of a opposite of 2K, which wants to go for more realism instead. I think the gameplay for this game is fine. It achieves what it sets out to do. It's very fast-paced, it's arcadey. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but another thing that holds this game back a lot is just the lack of game modes or a lack of match options. You're really just limited to doing a one-on-one, maybe a three-way, four-way, a tag match, and then an exploding barbed wire match. There also is the Casino Battle Royale, but outside of that, that's about it. The lack of diversity in regards to match type really does hold this game back a lot, because it just kind of becomes very repetitive and boring after a while, having to play through the same 4 matches repeatedly. Another thing about this game that I've noticed is just there's the lack of creative options. I like customizing things in wrestling games. In 2K, that's what I spend most of my time doing, is just creating things. Community creations is probably my favorite thing about the wrestling games today. It's always fascinating to see exactly how realistic somebody can make a custom wrestler. But for this game, you're very, very limited on your options that you can do. It seems as if you only have maybe 10 or so different options for what to wear or how you can part your hair or whatever it might be. And it really just seems as if you're creating the most generic looking wrestlers ever. And you can't really have much room for trying to create maybe real life wrestlers instead. I haven't really played through Road to Elite. I've played through it once. And typically career modes don't really interest me in wrestling games that much. Like for 2K23, I played through My Rise like once. And My Rise just isn't that interesting to me. But for Road to Elite, it takes maybe 3 hours to complete. You play through about 15 weeks of AEW TV, I suppose you could say. And you travel across the country, and you can train, and you can eat out at restaurants and stuff like that. There's even an option for being a vegetarian, which I think is quite interesting. I bet Bryan Danielson had something to do with that. But anyway, it was very short, and it's just like, okay, your first match here is a title match. Like, oh, sweet. But I think it's fine for what it accomplishes. It's just meant to be played repeatedly. I thought the minigames were the most interesting aspect of Road to Elite, though. But, you know, I think it's fine for what it accomplishes. I don't have much to say about it, because I haven't played it that much either. Overall, though, I do think this is a fun game. I did enjoy this a lot when I played it. I haven't played it in maybe a week or so. But I do think it's fun. It's a nice little wrestling game to play. And it provides a decent alternative to 2K23. This game isn't as bad as a lot of people say it is, but this game isn't great either. There's a lot of things that I think are missing, a lot of things that could definitely improve upon, but from a pure gameplay perspective, it's quite enjoyable. I thought that the most fun matches were the Fatal 4-Ways, because, you know, multi-man matches are always quite interesting. But one thing I loved about 2K was the fact that you could tamper with the rules. You could kind of make your own custom matches. And it was always really fun to mess with that. But in, you know, Fight Forever, you just kind of play it straight. I don't want to sit here and say, oh, this game is awful, you shouldn't play it, because this game isn't bad at all. It really isn't. I thought the ladder matches were quite enjoyable in this game, too. But as I said, though, the lack of match types does hold it back a little bit. But I liked the idea of customizing the arenas, despite the fact that there's not many options. You can just change the color of the ropes, and that's about it. But this game also does have a lot of weapons in it too. You can use a ladder, you can use a skateboard, which is probably the coolest weapon in the game. And similarly to the old Nintendo 64 wrestling games, you can pull weapons out of the crowd. And I always thought that that was quite interesting too. But I do think that the weapons are the best part of this game, for like the no DQ stuff. The weapons are very fragile, they'll break after like 2 hits. But I mean, outside of that, it's fun to just kind of ride around on a skateboard. But I do think this game is worth playing. I don't know if it's worth the full $60 because that's what I paid for it. But when this game goes on sale, I think it's pretty good for maybe $30. Maybe 40 would be the highest I'd go. But as I said though, your enjoyment just comes from just what you want to do in this game. Like if you just want kind of a fun arcade wrestling game to just kind of mess around with for 15 minutes at a time, it's just a decent game. If I had to assign a rating, I'd say probably a 7 out of 10.